Folks, welcome back to the shop. Got the BC build coming along. It runs, puts smoke through the pipe. So that was pretty exciting this week. But you're not here for that. It came. They came. It finally came. I had to buy almost 2 sets to get there, but today's the day. And as evidence, as we talked before, this is what happens to packages when I get a hold of them. Joyride's getting Jake brakes. So why don't you come along while we get them on there. We'll go through an overhead set. We're going to go through some of the wiring as a nice little treat to myself. When we put this truck together the first time, I don't remember if I wired them. So we'll figure that out. Now, being a 92 series, it's already got the tall valve covers. So no changes there. 53s, I believe, use a spacer. And I know there's tall and short valve covers like a 71. Jake sits on top through these 2 bolts. The bolts have to be changed, obviously, because they're longer, and they're also drilled for the oiling. That's how it gets oil up to the Jake to activate it. We're going to see, hopefully, I'm going to try not to change these lines. You know, they're in pretty good shape, and I think they're different. Yeah, they are different from an electronic injector to a mechanical. The valve bridges, being a 2-cycle, they're all exhaust. These have to be changed. The Jacobs has a wider bridge for the to push on. So we're going to get those changed out. We'll go through setting the bridge, and we're going to have to do a full overhead set on it. Now, any engine I'm going to reassemble, we always put everything back in the exact hole it came out of. Valve train is especially important because of wears. I can't see myself ever taking Jake brakes back off. Don't know why I would. So we are just going to pull these bridges and chuck them in the parts box. So the Jake will sit on here. Oh, get it right. And cradle the injector rocker like that. This one you can see is a broken tab. I've got a full another set of bodies, so I probably won't even use this one. I'm sure many of you will be quick to note that only one bridge has the extra boss on it to be activated by a Jake. So why change them all? Is it going to make a difference? Probably not. Now, Detroit explicitly says to not loosen these bridges on the engine. Reefing on it with a wrench, put a side load on the valve stem, and you can bend a valve. So I already did that. I believe the book says to put them in a vise. I stick a crescent wrench on the other end, knock them loose, throw them back on the engine. Every engine I've ever worked on that I can recall has a similar procedure for non-floating bridges. Everything nowadays doesn't have this stem and they just float and you don't adjust anything. It takes a feel, and all you're trying to do is to even the bridge so that it doesn't cock on the stem. You loosen it up, put a slight finger pressure on it, you feel for contact, and then you go a quarter of a turn. And you throw your screwdriver on the floor and kick your box parts. These original ones were either stretched or Loctited because they're turning quite difficult. Oh man. It's always nice when some bear of a man was in there before you. I ain't even going to use that one. So we got all our bridges set. We're going to go through and we're going to pull them back out to make sure that they don't turn and get these torqued up. Okay, so we've torqued Univice, our bridges, and reinstalled them. 20 foot-pounds, 20 to 25 is the range on those. Now I do recommend, if you're mixing and matching valve trainer components, particularly if you've just rebuilt heads, you know, you back your adjusters all the way off in case you have increased stem heights. You don't ram them down into a piston. Always try to set the engine off of TDC also to avoid that. Now you'll have 2 masters and 2 slaves on each side in an 8V. So we got them on there. Plugs in each of the ends, grommet in between, and a screw. It goes drone, master, master, drone. I use the digital torque wrench, if nothing else, for the recall feature. When you self-sabotage later and you're like, oh, did I torque that? And go through in the counts, and they're there. We're going to set the valves because we messed with changing bridges and even adjusting the ones we used. This is about the easiest engine to set valves on. The sequence is basically injector at max travel, you set the valves, and valves at max travel, you set the injector. Now setting the brakes. Valves have to be closed. Doesn't matter where. Rocker's got to be loose. So like right now, we can set the second and fourth one on this bank. So there's two different Jake height settings. Based on your pedestals. We have the later, as you would expect, pedestal, which calls for 64 thou. Now, who has a 64 thousandths feeler gauge? I don't. And plus, you know, this can rock a little bit. There's no accurate way to do that. When you're setting any Jake lash, valve's closed, you want to turn it down. Compress the valves a wee bit, squeeze out any potential oil. Run the adjustment back down until it touches. And we can use a feeler gauge, or excuse me, dial indicator feeler gauge. It's getting late. Zero it and back it off. $64 thousandths. Now at this point, we want to make sure everything's going to run right. I'm going to run it without the valve cover on it. It almost seems like it would be irresponsible not to try this much at this point, right? Okay, we got this side about buttoned up. Wired it. We're gonna zip tie that off. I'm gonna leave this valve cover off. We have to make our ECM connections down in here. So let's go to the other side. Do the same thing over there and see if we can make some Jakes. The harnesses that I got for the engine with this one set of engine brakes was trash, so I had to make a set. Got diagnostic link hooked up. I had these two outputs grounded. The files set up with the I's and the O's, the inputs and the outputs. So I undid the ground over here, and S3 is medium, T3 is low. Each side is going to be 2 solenoids, 4 cylinders, so it doesn't matter really how we hook it up. I don't see the need really for a 3-stage Jake. I have no desire to set it up that way. Interesting fact of note here that might be of use to others is I've been having trouble locating solenoids for these 92 series. I've been having trouble locating anything for them. And the one set of brakes that I got had 24 volt solenoids on it, and the other set had one smashed. So I ended up one solenoid short. 12 o'clock in the morning. What are we gonna do? I had a set of 765As off of a 60 series, which that's a whole another episode in itself. Something machined wrong from a Reliabilt, and it actually caused the engine to drop a valve, we believe. But anyway, 765s took that solenoid, and lo and behold, it fit. Works. So you should know it. Code should start going inactive when we get a ground back. And there went one. If you can see, 98.5 hours on it. So that ECM was put on when we put the truck together, so it's got its first 100 hours on it. I might think about dropping the oil soon. We'll clear those. We like our perfectly no fault. And this is plain old diagnostic link, nothing special about it. It is a legitimate subscription, but it's because we have Diagnostic Link 8 for DD platform and Cascadias. If I go into the ECM IO configuration under Tools, you can see our inputs here. Which K2 and K3, I gotta hook those up. We gotta get a ground switch to our Jakes over there. Engine brake, medium and low, S3, T3, they're both open. But over here when we activate, hopefully you can hear it over that. So S3 is this side, T3 is the other side. So pretty cool. Now we'll move into the cab and start doing the ground inputs for engine brake on, off, and switching. here we are inside the cab. Yeah, it's quite cozy, but as long as you don't put your arm around me, I won't say anything. DDEC wiring diagram. I never go anywhere without it. These are the switches we're looking for, which are digital inputs. They can vary. They usually don't, but this is where having the laptop will tell us. K2 is a light blue and black, wire number 583, and K3 is 979, is a white wire. Unfortunately, the interface harness that I used, they're labeled and correct, so we just got to pick those out, pin them in to our connector, run them over to our switch, and supply a ground to it. We should be able to rob digital ground off the cruise, because we know that works for the high idle. Okay, so we located all of our ends. I hopped my digital ground off of my cruise control and just used 2 on-off switches. The first stage will activate one stage through one, it's a double pole single throw, so one pole will activate one stage and it'll feed, the other pole will feed this second switch, and its throw will feed the second stage of Jake's. So let's take a look at our I/O configs. You can see K2 is now at none. K2 wasn't populated with a wire, and rather than they pull from the front and they're a pain, and rather than string a wire, I went into it with Cal tool, which we're not going to get into that. I'm not going to show it on YouTube because it would be irresponsible. I got in there and changed the location, here it is, to E1. Just picked an unused one that had a wire populated in it. So we click one stage on, K3 low goes to ground. Click the second stage on, medium goes to ground. And if you click this first one back off to be used as an on-off, they both go open. So let's throw the covers on it and see if it works. Well, we're back at the shop, and don't look like any major disasters. It's now 2:45 in the morning on Sunday, so one quick lap around the block. You know, I don't want to push my luck too hard with the neighbors. We'll try it again tomorrow.